Welcome to Smash Fiction, the podcast where we pit two or more fictional characters against one another in a battle of strength, or wits, or, oh, just wait, you'll see. This week, Kirk and Spock versus Sam and Frodo.
And see who would win?
No.
Okay, all right.
Do I have to?
Never mind.
Oh man, that's right.
Fine.
You know what? You take a stand, Claire. I'm going to reference this next time.
Never mind then.
I'll
Excuse
do
me.
it and see who would win. Fine.
I think we know it's and see who would fuck.
Well, everybody wins, so you have to be more specific.
Yeah.
True. And see who would fuck. Fine. All right. We knew our universe began with a mighty bang, but what came before that? We know our universe will end in a lukewarm bath of entropy, but will that be the end of everything? We know that our universe is expanding, but what is it expanding into? There is a place, outside space and time, a place between universes, and in that place, there is a house. That house has a basement. That basement has the wildest parties you'll find this side of eternity. The carpet is shag, the music is too loud, the air is smoky, the posters, black velvet. And crowded around a low table, sitting on mismatched chairs, are all the beings that exist outside of space and time, which the Beyonder has decided are cool enough to hang. They drink beer, they talk politics, and most importantly, they play Texas Hold'em. The final card hit the table. Well, said Q, sliding a stack of poker chips forward, I am very much raising. Fold I must, said Yoda, tossing his cards into the middle of the table. Grand Galactic Inquisitor, were you just trying to steal my Cheetos? Asked Desire of the Endless. Ignore me, said the Grand Galactic Inquisitor. Also, I fold. As do I, said Desire. The dealer, a floating white-gloved hand by the name of Master Hand, scooped up their cards and set them aside. I'll call, said a bearded man dressed in white. And who are you again? Said Q. Gandalf. I came here with Albus. He and I go way back. Gandalf motioned to a man in purple robes across the room who is currently hunched over and vomiting into a potted plant. One by one, everyone around the table slid their cards to the center in defeat. What you got, Beardy? Asked Q. Full house, said Gandalf, revealing his cards. And you? Oh, I don't have shit, said Q. Well done. Finally someone who's willing to go out on a limb. Usually I feel like I'm playing with a bunch of scaredy cat mortals. Hey, now that's not called for, said the Metatron. No, don't get me started on mortals, said Gandalf, adding a newly acquired stack of chips to his pile. You'd think that a being with a finite lifespan would be better at being decisive, but they can sometimes waste a decade or more, too afraid to seize an opportunity right in front of them. I know what you mean, said Q. Like these two dinguses I was watching for a while, Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. I started omnisciently spying on them because there was obviously some potential for serious action, but they never did anything, so eventually I gave up. I got a better one for you. In my last physical incarnation, I spent years on an exhausting quest with these two little hobbit fellows that kept making goo-goo eyes at each other the whole time, but neither one had the stomach to make a move. There was even this one time when I was about to fall down a chasm to my death, I screamed at them with my final words, "Fuck you fools," but I think they misheard me. Oh no, mine was much spicier. My pair couldn't have been more different, disagreed all the time, weren't even the same species, but the heat between them was undeniable. Well, respectfully, I must disagree. This was a timeless romance. Samwise and Frodo were as of a kind as any two souls have ever been. Guys, can we get back to playing? Asked Raiden. Oh yeah, said Q. Care to make it interesting? What did you have in mind? Asked Gandalf. If it won't happen on its own, we'll engineer it. Send both couples away to some sort of secluded romantic destination and see who hooks up first. If Kirk and Spock do, I win. If Sim, Sam, and Bobo or whatever do, then you win. Oh no, I don't think it's right for us to be interfering in the lives of mortals this way, said Gandalf. Let's just get back to playing. Death of Rats, it looks like it's your turn to deal. Death of Rats began to shuffle the deck. It was taking a while as the deck was roughly the same size as him. That being said, said Gandalf, under his breath, I would totally smoke your ass. Q shot up out of his chair. All right, Grandpa, let's rumble. Gentlemen, came a voice from in front of the liquor cabinet. There is no need for violence. I can provide what you seek. The man wore a white suit and had salt and pepper hair. He smiled as he poured bourbon into a chilled tumbler. How many people are at this party anyway? Asked Q. A lot, said Smash Fiction patron Brett Greer. My name is Mr. Rourke. I own a place where fantasies become realities. An island resort which could be made very much to your specifications. What's in it for you? Asked Gandalf. I imagine many of you here would be interested in also placing bets on the outcome of this arrangement. Madam Webb, the Elemist, Hades, Bill Cipher, Dr. Manhattan, and the Lion Turtle all nodded. Master Hand gave a thumbs up. Very well, he said. I will arrange the bets and take 5% for myself. How do we know when the wager is complete? Asked Gandalf. First to declare their love? No, clearly it's first to bone, said Q. Let's say the winner will be the first couple on the island to express physical intimacy in one form or another. As little as a kiss will suffice, assuming it is sufficiently passionate. Q grumbled. What is this, the made-for-TV version? I can agree to this, said Gandalf. Then the terms are set, said Mr. Rourke. By the time our guests arrive, the island will be outfitted with an endless array of romantic attractions. Picnicking, parasailing, scuba diving, ziplining, hot springs, an intimate candlelit restaurant, and many more. If there is truly any spark of romance in these would-be couples, then this trip to Fantasy Island will fan it into a raging bonfire. But which couple will be the first to act on their feelings? Will Frodo finally show us that his sword glows not only in the presence of orcs, but also in the presence of Sam? Will the star-crossed Star Trekkers finally set their phasers to smooch? It's Valentine's Day, and yet again, everyone else grouped into pairs already, and I was left single. Ladies. That is why I, Claire Mulcairn, will be your judge this week. Representing Team Kirk and Spock are Katrina Ernman-Newton.
I am Katrina.
And Kris Newton.
Prepare to come aboard the Enterprise D.
Ugh,
Oh, nice.
this is the worst.
Representing Team Sam and Frodo are MeganBob.
It's like the great Smash Fiction episodes, advocates. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the ruling, because how could the ruling be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was with so many awful rebuttals that happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new episode will come, and when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clear. I know folks in those episodes had a lot of chances of shutting up, only they didn't. They kept going, because they were holding on to something. That there's sexy hobbits in this world, advocates, and it's worth fighting for.
You done?
Yes, I know.
All right.
It was a journey.
And Dan Mulcairn.
Yeah, I know we're doing kind of a slashfic type thing here, but I swear to the Einer, the first time anyone mentions a turgid member, I'm out of here.
Aww. Let me rewrite my stuff.
In order to see who's going first this week, I tasked the contestants with writing angry letters to Kevin Feige until he finally agreed to codify one of my personal ships, Captain America and Bucky. Team Kirk and Spock did a pretty good job. Their essay was quite compelling. It left me in tears, but unfortunately, they received the standard form letter back from Marvel HQ, thanking them for their interest and giving them a free coupon code for a PDF download of the first issue of Secret Empire. Team Sam and Frodo came to me claiming to have actually done it, and as proof, they sent me a video file which they claimed was a preview copy of Avengers Infinity War, complete with a scene that officially canonized Cap and Bucky forever. It seemed to be pretty legit the first couple times I watched it, even though there was something nagging at me that seemed off. So I gave them the win at this one. It was only when I watched it for the third time that it finally clicked to me. The version of the film that they sent me was only 20 seconds long, and it was filmed entirely using action figures. But regardless, I have made my ruling, and it shall stand. Team Sam and Frodo is going first this week. Team Sam and Frodo, demonstrate why your duo is the one true pairing to rule them all, and in the darkness, bone each other?
Yeah! Oh, happy Valentine's to me.
Look, I'm not saying I don't get the appeal of Kirk and Spock being together. They're both strong characters, very intelligent and competent, and obviously have tons of respect for each other. But just wanting something to happen doesn't mean that it will happen. And that maxim is especially true when it comes to romance. While there's tons of evidence right in the book that Sam and Frodo clearly shack up right after the events of Return of the King, it takes the most optimistic of Trekkies bending painfully over backwards to suggest that Kirk and Spock have ever done anything more intimate than that moment in the first movie when a gravely injured Spock whispers from his hospital bed about how great friendship is. In fact, there's a ton more evidence that these two are not into each other. There's a moment in the episode Amok Time when a female Vulcan appears on the Enterprise's view screen. Spock introduces her as T'Ping, his wife. Two of the characters shown on screen at this point are Nurse Chapel, who is unambiguously attracted to Spock, and Kirk. Chapel's reaction is exactly what you might expect from someone struggling with romantic feelings towards Spock. She looks confused, hurt, disappointed. Kirk, though, looks surprised, but intrigued. During the whole sequence on Vulcan, when Spock and T'Pring are supposed to be wed, Kirk doesn't show any obvious jealousy or hurt, he's just curious about this new aspect of Vulcan culture. Not at all what you'd expect if he was really carrying a torch for someone and just discovered that the object of his affection was already spoken for. Incidentally, this is also the episode where we see Spock at his most biologically sexual due to him experiencing Pon farr. But even then, his advances are largely directed toward Nurse Chapel, as we see during a very tense scene in Spock's quarters. We get to see later how he behaves toward Kirk while still under Pon farr, and he doesn't try to take his captain on an away mission to the Bone Zone, he tries to kill Kirk. That brings up another point against Kirk and Spock. It takes severe biological manipulation for Spock to experience, express, or act on feelings of romance. This happens a couple of times throughout his life, most notably when he's affected by Omicron spores in the episode This Side of Paradise, but in that case, he's overcome with love for Layla Kalomi, a woman he last met several years ago, not the shirt-tearing girdle wearer whose spoken word covers he's had to grimly tolerate every karaoke night on the Enterprise. Spock is so crippled by emotion in the naked time that he's reduced to a blubbering mess, but even then, with his emotions raging out of control, he only admits to feelings of friendship toward Kirk. Ultimately, these two Starfleet officers want something very different out of a relationship. Kirk is very physical and sexual when it comes to his relationships. See episode 31 of Smash Fiction for a pretty thorough rundown. He's about momentary impulsive passion with no consideration of the later consequences. Spock is someone who's always concerned with consequence, with logic, someone over whom passion holds no sway. Even if the hypersexual Kirk did throw himself at Spock, Spock is highly unlikely to respond in kind. But I'm not even convinced that, even with the surroundings of this couple's retreat, Kirk would do so. These two have been in much more potentially steamy situations before, and yet, even though Kirk isn't nearly as timid with expressing his emotions as Spock is, not once have we seen him try any moves with his science officer. Kirk and Spock have been through hell and back over the Enterprise's 5-year mission. They've traveled through time, confronted gods, Spock's even come back from the dead, and none of these extreme life or death challenges have been enough to get them to admit their love for each other. So, even if you believe that these two do belong together, whatever will ultimately bring them together will have to be a bigger deal than death and resurrection. I'm afraid that beach volleyball and couples yoga just isn't going to do the trick.
Frodo and Sam have the kind of love that any of us would want in our lives. It's enduring, supportive, and about as affectionate as you could hope for. However much doubt anyone can cast on how canonical their relationship is, it's impossible to deny how powerful it is. Well, let's be honest, their love is about as canon as it can be without being a Harlequin romance full of steamy scenes in the bag end bathtub or making creative use of Sam's wheelbarrow. That said, the whirlpool bathtub in this Fantasy Island suite is going to see a lot of sudsy Hobbit action. Send me your fix, please!
Oh, so much hair in the filter.
I know, so much. Sam eavesdrops on Gandalf's visit where he tells Frodo about the ring's history. Sam may not want to do anything risky, like hide in the bushes outside someone's house, but he heard Ray's voices and needs to keep an eye on the safety of Mr. Frodo. In the film, when Gandalf pulls Sam through the window to yell at him, the camera pans to Frodo, who just gives a warm, loving smile as if to say, "Aw, that's my baby, always looking out for me." Next, Gandalf pulls an "It's dangerous to go alone, take this," and sends Sam with Frodo on what is clearly the most challenging team-building activity of all time. Gandalf ships it. He's intense, but he ships it. Rightfully so. The text is littered with love and affection between these two. Even in the midst of what is a horrific journey where the One Ring is mentally torturing Frodo, Sam and Frodo are dodging enemies, getting creeped on by Gollum, and scrounging for food. There's still time for romance. In the Two Towers, Sam watches Frodo seeming to glow with some inner light whenever he's sleeping and says out loud, "I love him." He's like that, and sometimes it shines through somehow, but I love him whether or no. Looks like Sam found the subject of his watercolor study for that candlelight painting class. Think for 1 second about how we would see this exchange if the characters were different genders. There would be no question that this is romantic love. Later on, as they climb the stairs of Cirith Ungol, Sam tells Frodo to lay near with my arm around you, so he'll know that he's secure from being grabbed in his sleep by someone or something. Gollum's off doing Gollum stuff, comes back to see Frodo sleeping with his head in Sam's lap, and Sam's hand laying, quote, softly upon his master's breast. Peace was in both their faces. It does not take the all-seeing eye of Sauron to see that this is intimate and loving. Again, this is taking place in hell on Middle-earth. Literal, fiery, shitty hell. Give these hobbits a gift basket of champagne and strawberries in their nice, not-on-fire room, and they won't just snuggle. You will not see them again for the duration of this stay. Please write this fic. Is this love one-sided? Will Sam reach for Frodo's hand as they ride ponies on the beach only to have Frodo pull back his hand? Frick no! As Mount Doom self-destructs and Frodo's horribly maimed hand is bleeding, he tells Sam, I am glad you are here with me, here at the end of all things, Sam. That's a definite declaration of love to say, if I die now, I am glad it's with you at my side. Romantic love, though? Well, there's the fact that after Sam gets married to Rosie, and Frodo's like, that's awesome! Move in with me! Sam thinks he's super lucky, but, quote, Frodo knew that he was more lucky himself, for there was not a hobbit in the Shire that was looked after with such care. Yeah, 'cause now he's living the polyamorous hobbit love dream. Frodo's delighted for Sam's happiness and wants him around. Sam still wants to be with Frodo even though he's married, and Rosie's obviously cool with it because she moves in and has some adorable hobbit babies. This isn't casual either. This isn't even just serious. This is commitment to the absolute very end. Frodo goes to the Undying Lands to heal his wounds and eventually pass away there. And Rosie passes away in Middle-earth, and then instead of staying to be with his kids, instead of staying to die in the place he's loved so much, Sam gets on that damn elf boat and goes to the Undying Lands to be with the love of his life. Before he goes, he gives the record of his life to Eleanor, his eldest daughter, and there's no fighting or disagreement about whether or not he should go. Of course he's going to go. Of course he should. The person who loves him is across the sea, and Sam will follow him. Sam would follow him anywhere.
All right, powerful stuff. I might cry by the end of this one. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, so many feels.
Yeah. All right, Team Kirk and Spock, boldly go where many fanfic writers have gone before.
Okay. Kirk and Spock were made for slash fiction. Actually, slash fiction was made, or at least named, for Kirk/Spock. Before slash was even a thing, Star Trek inspired straight women across America to be like, what's it called when you have to sit down and write a story where two specific guys kiss? Whatever that's called, I have a bad case of that. If you watch a random episode of Trek, you might well wonder what all the fuss is about. You're not going to see Kirk and Spock rubbing each other down with decontaminant goo like a later, shittier Enterprise crew. They're going to be chatting about gaseous anomalies or something. But if you keep watching, you'll see that this is the pairing that made a nation squee as one. It's all under the surface. We get a lot of physical closeness and flirty looks between these two, but they rarely talk about their feelings. That's why they're the cool gay dads of slash fiction. They leave so much pointedly unsaid that the fanfic practically writes itself. But fortunately for our argument, Star Trek is also full of alien mindfuckery. So we do get the occasional episode where an altered state forces our heroes to open up about what they're always feeling. And in those rare moments, things get said. It happens in The Naked Time, as Dan mentioned, which you may know is the one where shirtless George Takei sword fights. Shockingly, that's like the third gayest thing in that episode. Basically, a space virus is raging through the Enterprise crew, lowering inhibitions. And now the ship's going to crash because one guy's so high that he locked himself in the engine room and won't stop singing love songs. Kirk needs Spock's help to save the day, but Spock's already rolling real hard on Space Molly. So when Kirk finds him, Spock's crying about his fucked up childhood. Then, when Kirk tries to snap him out of it, Spock holds Kirk around the arms and says, quote, Jim, when I feel friendship for you, I'm ashamed. Spock's upbringing taught him that love was wrong, but respect and admiration were okay. That became friendship, and now Spock's afraid of how that feeling's growing. Keep in mind, this is 1 year into their relationship, and already Spock is unlearning a lifetime of conditioning. Space Molly is a hell of a drug, but James T. Kirk is a hell of a drug. So Spock's at maximum doe-eyed vulnerability, and Kirk slaps the eyeshadow right off his face. Because, after all, everyone on board is about to be killed by one sad drunk. Now's not the time. Spock keeps talking, Kirk keeps slapping, and finally Spock slaps back, infecting Kirk. Now Kirk's tripping Spaceballs, and he gives a speech about how, as a Starfleet captain, he can't have love. He mentions that even though Yeoman Rand is very attractive, quote, the captain's not permitted to notice her. Now, is Rand really the most fuckable crew member that springs to Kirk's mind, or just the most fuckable one who's not in the room? Either way, we learn that Kirk, for all his ladies' man rep, has strong scruples against even considering a shipboard romance. Anyway, seeing Kirk's pain and desperation gives Spock the strength to overpower the Space Molly, and he saves the day. Whenever this kind of thing happens, it brings the relationship to a higher simmer, but never a full boil. Spock acts cold, but when he's under stress or on space drugs, he always shows by word or deed that he cares deeply for Kirk. Meanwhile, Kirk is a passionate man who falls in love quickly, but never with anyone on the ship. He falls for people outside Starfleet due to admiration for their courage and character, or due to alien powers, like the insufferable Elan, a space princess whom evolution has gifted with aphrodisiac tears to compensate for having the worst personality in the history of television. However, from Elan to Edith Keeler to Carol Marcus to Antonia, Kirk loses them all because he puts Starfleet responsibility first. Yet, despite Spock's stoic philosophy and Kirk's sense of duty, the tension is always there, and these two can always get through to one another. In Amok Time, when Spock's biology calls him to Vulcan to mate with his destined bride T'Pring, Spock breaks Vulcan taboo to confide these urges to Kirk, and Kirk sacrifices his all-important command rather than betray that trust. When Kirk is forced to fight Spock to the death for T'Pring, because alien cultures are stupid, Spock manages to emerge from full-on blood frenzy to plead for Kirk's life. And, just as Kirk's slap gave Spock the strength to overcome Space Molly, when Spock thinks he's killed Kirk, he snaps out of his biological fucking imperative and kicks his destined bride to the curb. Basically, Kirk is like John Henry, except instead of beating the machine with his dying act, he destroys heterosexuality itself. Spock and Kirk acknowledge their connection more and more, until, in the final episode of TOS, Kirk says that Spock is closer to him than anyone in the universe. So surely the series ends with some kind of emotional payoff between these two, right? Nope. This franchise has been on the cusp of the final frontier for 50 years. If there's one thing they understand, it's edging.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh.
Instead, after the 5-year mission, Kirk's promotion separates him from Spock, who then returns to Vulcan to purge his human emotions for good. However, and this is key, they find their way back together on the Enterprise, as they always do. In their reunion adventure, Spock telepathically connects with V'ger, a machine entity trying to understand humanity, and ends up in sickbay with Captain Kirk in the scene Dan mentioned. This is the slashiest scene that ever slashed. Spock clasps Kirk's hand from the sickbed and tells him with a smile that, quote, "this simple feeling is what V'ger can't understand." And this totally changes the trajectory of Spock's life. At the beginning of the film, he was accepting the Vulcan Medal of Emotional Unavailability. Now, he's reactivating his Starfleet commission and soon embraces his feelings in the films in a way he never did on TV. That hand clasp saves Spock. In the climactic Star Trek film, Wrath of Khan, Don't At Me, Kirk reunites with an old flame and meets a son he never knew he had. Naturally, the film reaches its crescendo in a tearful scene between Kirk and his son. I'm sorry, did I say his son? I meant his Spock. Spock gives his life for captain and crew in one of the most spectacularly emotional moments in Trek. Spock dies with famous last words, quote, "I have been, and always shall be, your friend." Again, friendship, the same feeling that made Spock ashamed and afraid at the beginning of the 5-year mission, now professed openly in a dying breath to the man who saved him from a life of self-denial and loneliness. You may ask, why not, "I love you"? Because Spock's journey in life has been to harmonize his heart and his mind, his personal feelings and his philosophy of virtue. Love is not a strong enough word for what Spock means by friend. Incidentally, all that took 17 years, whereas in the 17 years that Frodo knew Sam before the Lord of the Rings, he apparently never learned to think of Samwise Gamgee as anything but the guy who mows the roof. People think Vulcans take a long time to warm up.
Mows the roof.
Kris is right. Kirk and Spock have big emotional moments together. Sam and Frodo do too. These are both great loves. But only one of them is a fun love. Almost every Star Trek episode has a moment where Kirk cracks up at one of Spock's deadpan jokes, and Kirk is constantly smirking at Spock like he's the most adorable tribble cub in the litter. These two dudes just love hanging out. That's why they're always in landing parties together. That third guy in a red shirt isn't security, he's a chaperone. In a way, the 5-year mission was one long, super fun first date, which would explain why Kirk kept calling Spock to go out again for like 6 more movies. Sam and Frodo's journey to Mordor was also one long date, but instead of having fun adventures, they mostly cried and ate bread.
Sick dunks on Lembas.
A date like that can suck the life right out of a relationship, and it seems like it did that for Frodo and Sam, who could have easily stuck together after the events of the books, but didn't. They lived together with Sam's wife Rosie for a while, and then when Frodo started to get ill, Frodo went to the Grey Havens, and Sam stayed with Rosie, probably because being the mayor of Hobbiton like 7 times and bouncing little curly-headed babies on your knee is way more fun than helplessly watching your friend languish. And don't say Sam couldn't have gone to the Undying Lands, because he did go after Rosie died. Spending most of his life without Frodo was Sam's choice, because what Sam really cares about is Frodo's welfare and well-being. He's not nearly as attached to Frodo's company. That's why there are so many hurt/comfort/fics between Frodo and Sam. Their friendship only really gets intense when somebody's been stabbed or wrapped up in spiderwebs. Meanwhile, semi-retired Kirk and Spock are having a great time loading whales onto spaceships and going on rocket boot camping trips. Those movies aren't great, but you can't deny their fun. Nor can you deny that Kirk and Spock can't stay away from each other. So, if Kirk and Spock are having so much fun together, what's it going to take for their space romp to go full romance? All they need to turn their simmer up to a boil is opportunity. Kirk can't put the moves on Spock when Spock is his first officer. Even for an organization like Starfleet, where dudes run around shirtless and women are required to wear skirts that extend no more than 3 inches below the hip bone, HR is not okay with the captain and first officer boning down on the clock. And as we've mentioned, neither is Kirk. This isn't just the man keeping love down. Kirk takes that ethic seriously. This isn't a problem, because Q can pull them from any part of their timeline when Spock isn't serving under Kirk. From there, it's just a simple matter of throwing them into an intimate situation as equals and watching the fireworks, or, in the remastered edition, the crappy-looking CGI fireworks. Here's what happens on Fantasy Island. Kirk and Spock are interested in different activities. Kirk wants to wrestle in the gymnasium, go hang gliding off the cliffs, and do other shirt-ripping guy stuff. Spock signs up to hear lectures on computer technology and learn to play exotic Earth ballads like In the Navy and Do You Think I'm Sexy on his Vulcan lyre. And attend a black tie salon on moral philosophy, because that's totally a thing that definitely exists. However, due to an administrative mix-up, both men also get signed up as partners in a week-long salsa dancing competition. Surprisingly, they're not on the same page and don't do well in practice. Kirk hates losing. Spock is frustrated at not being immediately good at something for once, and they're both competitive. So they start going to each other's events, trying to figure out why they aren't clicking as partners, despite knowing each other so well. They wrestle in the gymnasium, to the soundtrack from Amok Time, naturally. Jingle, jingle, jingle.
Oh, no.
They debate.
There's no rhythm there.
Oh, no.
They debate each other about the nature of love at the salon while looking very sharp in tuxedos, complete with boutonnieres. And on the night before the salsa dancing finals, they decide to mind meld during their umpteenth rehearsal, determined to get rid of the mental block keeping them from salsa greatness. The icy vistas of professional ethics and philosophical detachment melt in the salsa heat. And before you know it, melding turns to smooching, and somewhere, Mr. Rourke smiles. It turns out getting these two to kiss is much like getting a subdued performance out of William Shatner in The Wrath of Khan. All it takes is long rehearsals, physical exhaustion, and a little bit of magic. Oh, and Ricardo Montalban.
Send me your fic, Katrina.
Can and will.
Yeah.
All right. Great job, both of you guys. Man, I can already tell it's going to be a hard one. I don't want to do this one.
Sorry, Claire. Sorry, not sorry.
I know.
Yeah. All right, time for some rebuttals. Team Sam and Frodo. You shall not pass up an opportunity to do some rebuttals.
I like how you basically said that like a soccer announcer.
Goal.
To quote Spock, I find your argument strewn with gaping defects in logic.
Wow.
All right, go for it.
As sort of a broad, overreaching statement in general, I feel like you guys have really convinced me that Kirk and Spock are great friends and they have a lot of respect for each other, but there's nothing that you described Kirk and Spock doing that also good friends or even close family members wouldn't do or say or feel for each other. I totally buy that they're close. I just don't buy that there's anything more than that.
I find it to be self-evident. If you look at the way that they touch each other and the way that they are in proximity to each other on the ship, it's not verbal evidence, so it's hard to express in the podcast, but think of the way that Kirk looks at Spock. I mean, the eyes he makes at him compared to anyone else in the show. Nurse Chapel's longing looks at Spock have nothing on the way Kirk looks at Spock. And you have to consider it's a much more constrained situation. It's a commanding officer and his subordinate. They cannot do anything about this. And yet, there's an episode where Kirk thinks Spock is giving him a very uncharacteristic back rub and is totally into it. And when he finds out that it's a woman doing it, he waves her off and is clearly disappointed. The hand clasp, the moment with the glass when Spock is dying, these are all like very touchy-feely, sentimental moments that go far beyond what friends are portrayed as doing most of the time on Star Trek.
I agree that it's intimate, but I think you yourself underlined the point I was trying to make, which is that we see what romance and sexual attraction looks like on Star Trek. We see it in Nurse Chapel. We see it in Kirk all the time. The fact that what Kirk and Spock have is different from each other, even though I agree that they probably share more with each other than they do with anyone else, but it doesn't mean that it's romantic. It doesn't mean that it's sexual. It means that it's something entirely different.
I think the important thing to notice is that it's intense. The thing about it is, we see Kirk and we see Spock interacting with McCoy. They're the power trio in this. And their relationships with him are very different. And he's their other closest friend. But the way that Kirk and Spock interact, the way that they tease each other. I'm thinking about this scene at the end of Galileo 7, when Kirk decides to sidle up to Spock and basically joke with him about how he finally reasoned out a way to have an emotional outburst. The closeness in that is just very different from basically any other kind of interaction we see between friends. And it's as close as I think we've established Kirk is willing to get with Spock while they are in active service. For all of the mad love that James T. Kirk is willing to lay it down on alien ladies and miscellaneous Earth ladies, he does not mess with his crew. And when he makes undying professions of love, when he's rolling Space Molly, he talks about the vastness and the overpowering commitment he has to the Enterprise, to the ship. This is his bones, and the breath in his body is his command. So the closeness is important. And I think our case is that, given the opportunity, it's gonna blow up.
I want to make clear, too, something you said in your argument, that we see how Kirk deals with romance and that it tends to be like physical and shallow. I think that while Kirk has some of that in his history, when we see his great loves, they're not that. They are people that, as we mentioned, he cares about them because he respects them and admires them. I mean, you could argue that maybe the greatest love of his life outside of Spock is Edith Keeler, who is, by the way, a peace activist who reaches out to him to help him and who he respects for her vision and her
integrity
goodness and her commitment to peace. Spock is a pacifist who is everything that Kirk respects and admires, as we see as they grow closer throughout the franchise. So Spock is his type. It's just that he's never been able to pursue him. I think you just have to accept, like, this is one of those relationships, one of those slash relationships that is all about what's under the surface. The reason it's sexy is because they can't say it out loud.
I think you're very right about the kind of relationship that it is and the thing that makes it so compelling. But I did want to bring up, one of the things you keep talking about is that difference in command level. And so it means that Kirk ends up not being able to hang on to a lot of lovers because he has responsibilities primarily to his role and primarily to his station, especially in regards to Spock. That stops him. I want to draw a comparison and say that with Sam and Frodo, we don't have that because there is class difference. Like, that's a big part of Lord of the Rings. Like, very clearly a lot of class issues being, Tolkien's got some real axes to grind. Mm-hmm. Sometimes literal axes. But that doesn't stop them. So there's not a hard and fast thing that has to be a reason to stop them. To me, that says that Kirk's responsibility as a leader is so powerful that overrides everything else, and that I can't see how that wouldn't override it no matter where he was or when he was.
Well, it's a professional ethic, so if he's not in command of Spock, then there's not going to be a problem.
Professional ethics? Come on, get boning.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's sexy. That's why they've been held apart, is because of this professional ethic. All we need is a situation where it's not in the way, and these two are going to have an opportunity they've never had. Whereas with Sam and Frodo, I would argue that's not a professional ethic. That's not like a conscious standard. That is a cultural bias or a cultural barrier between these two that
it's
in fact breaks
division
down under stress. And I think we can make a strong argument that then when they're out of the stressful situation, that tends to reinsert itself. You know, Tolkien based their relationship on the relationship between officers and Batman in World War I, which was notorious for this. During the war...
Did you say officers and Batman?
It's a real term.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an actual rank. It's a Batman.
Let's be real clear. If people thought that those relationships, the officer-Batman relationship, were not sexual, they are fucking wrong and dumb.
All right, now I'm just picturing Batman making out with James Gordon.
It's more complicated than that.
But yeah, the point I wanted to make was that those relationships sometimes verged into sexual and were in this kind of gray area. But the thing about them is when the war was over, oftentimes the circumstances for those class barriers to be overcome also went away, which I think is an issue between Sam and Frodo. Like, when they're not on the way to Mordor and almost dead, are those barriers going to reinsert themselves?
All right, Team Kirk and Spock. Roark!
The point that you made about Nurse Chapel versus Kirk's reaction to the thing with T'Pring, where she appears on the screen. First of all, Spock is biologically linked to T'Pring because of a thing that was done in their childhood. So his specific attraction to her is like totally locked in. What I want to know is, how do you think this whole aspect of like jealousy even plays into it? Like, we know that Kirk has been around. We know that probably Spock hasn't, but like, there's no reason to think that Kirk is going to be like hung up on monogamy.
He's from a utopian future.
Can you think of a specific instance in which he was not monogamous? I mean, arguably he's a serial monogamist, but I don't think that there's any evidence that he's into like open relationships or polyamory or anything of that nature.
Oh, that's not what I'm talking about. Although I'll point out that I would guess that he's more into it than Sam and Frodo would be with Rosie, which I think is pure fanfic speculation. But
what?
I mean, they all move in together.
They move
There's times when you have to connect the dots, and times when the dots are pre-connected for you.
They are shacking up together to raise a family with this guy. If you saw that in real life, you would be like, okay, that's not just like some rando. They are clearly all fucking.
But also, I think there's a pretty well-established Hobbit custom of the Warrens in the way the Tooks all live together, the way that Meriadoc and Pippin, their families do big.
Because they have massive places. Like, theirs is a full-on sort of medieval hall style thing almost. Bag End's just Bag End. Like, it's basically a cottage.
Yeah, but we see that Bilbo decides to take on his nephew because Bilbo's alone. Frodo would be alone. He's not going to partner up and get married. We see that he's too altered from the events of the Ring to really want a partnership like that. For him, the best thing to do would be to have his best friend and adorable hobbit babies and a bonus nice hobbit lady to come live in his house. I think that there's room to interpret that in both directions. I think you could read that as platonic. Let's live in this house because I am a horribly wounded person and I need my friends with me, and my friends are great people. You could also read that as, and now at last the love can be at my house instead of only
I feel
out
like
on the
if
road.
it was just friendship, then why wouldn't he go hang out with like Merry and Pippin as well, who he grew up with and who are his like other buds?
Because
but no,
they
he goes
stay
with
in
Sam.
Gondor.
I mean, they stay for a while. They do come back.
Yeah, but don't they end up buried there? They spend their later life, I think, there in Gondor.
I know, now we're getting deep
Sorry,
into
sorry,
the appendices.
Sorry.
They end up buried in Pippin?
They...
Talking about his particular relationship as a kind of nursemaid character. So then that means that whenever Frodo goes to the Undying Lands, why would Sam want to go to be with him? Like, what would be the point of that unless it was truly about being with Frodo? Because obviously the Undying Lands, he'll be fine. He doesn't need Sam in the Undying Lands, but they do need each other. And Sam stays there to be with Rosie because he has children and an obligation. Frodo basically explicitly tells him, you need to stay here and have this life because I cannot give you that in the Undying Lands. There will be no children. There will be no you getting to enjoy the thing I suffered for. You have to stay and have this life that I can't have.
And that is vital because hobbits are committed to this domestic life. Both of these characters care deeply about the life of the Shire. He only goes to the Undying Lands at really the end of his life. He spends 60 years without Frodo. When you put these two in a romantic situation, a potentially sexual situation, if that doesn't have legs, if that's not how we're going to live together, I don't think they go for it. Frodo would not go for it for the same reason that he told Sam to get married. I can't give you this life, therefore let's not do this. Let's not get into this.
But let's live together, right, though? But, like, let's sleep in the same bathtub, sleep in the same bathtub at the same time. I also maybe sleep in it. I don't know how
There's a hurricane in the Shire. Quick, everyone into the bathtub. Rosie, get all the adorable babies.
I know. Oh, no, the babies are so cute. Get them.
Anyone know where I can find some good people hiding out from a hurricane fan fiction? That's kind of my thing.
They play a lot of board games.
I'll do some digging and see what I get.
I'm pretty sure there's a Rich the Day After Tomorrow fanfic vein somewhere out there.
So, after a heartfelt conversation in their hotel room, Spock tells Kirk that he has been, and always shall be, and leans in for a kiss, only to be interrupted at the last minute by the arrival of room service. Sam manages to get as far as saying, I love, one morning over second breakfast, only to revise his originally planned sentence at the last moment into, I love second breakfast. But then, one afternoon, Q and Gandalf are summoned into Mr. Rourke's office. He tells them that the contest has been won because a couple has expressed physical intimacy on the island, but it was not one of the couples they submitted. Q and Gandalf scour the hotel, trying to figure out who this couple is, where they could be hiding, until they finally open the door to a broom closet where they find two handsome men, one in a leather jacket and one in an orange flight suit, passionately making out. When asked, they say their names are Poe and Finn. You see, it seems that at the last minute, Yoda asked Rourke if he could submit a couple of his own, and Rourke, always a fan of the last-minute twist, just couldn't help himself. And so, Yoda wins the bet. And at this point, you may be asking yourself, what sort of substance would immortal beings wager? For the record, it was 17 quadrillion pounds of Heinz canned macaroni and cheese, the only known substance in reality to be completely immune to entropy. After about 10 minutes of yelling at Rourke and Yoda and each other, Gandalf and Q storm out of the office and, oh shoot, while they weren't watching, Kirk and Spock totally started making out. Oh, and it looks like Sam and Frodo are too now, skipping over second base entirely as they dash towards third. But wait, who started first? Well, there's no way of telling now, and they can't just call it a draw. They have to bet about something else. Some way to prove whose OTP is the GOAT, and then they both figure it out. They might have to wait a year or two to make it happen, but they are indeed both immortals, so whatever. The new challenge is this. Which couple is going to have the sickest wedding? In order to make something, which is not at all supposed to be a contest, into a contest, Q and Gandalf have puppeteered things from behind the scenes to make sure that both weddings occur on Fantasy Island on the same day. So the question is, which of your weddings is going to be better attended? And which of your weddings is going to seize the ultimate guest of honor, Smash Fiction patron Brett Greer?
Is this the lightning round?
Oh, also it's the lightning round.
Crack-a-doom!
Crack-a-boom.
That really snuck up on us that time.
Yep.
So, advocates, what's the theme? What's the color scheme? Who are your best men or best women? Who are your groomsmen or groomsladies? What do you do in your ceremony that the guests will remember forever? What food will you serve? What's the first song you'll dance to? What special treat will make your reception the best party ever? I realize this is a lot of questions, so feel free to pick and choose a few if you wish. You won't be penalized if you don't answer them all. So, in Smash Fiction tradition, we are going to reverse the order on this one, so Team Kirk and Spock will be going first, followed by Team Sam and Frodo. Team Kirk and Spock, if your wedding vows don't include some variant of I have been and always shall be, I'm going to burn that chapel to the ground.
Oh my gosh,
wow.
oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, it's so
All right,
cool.
take some time if you need it.
Okay.
If you need like 30 seconds or whatever.
All right, I'm thinking. Kris, are you thinking?
I'm thinking.
All right, awesome. So this is going to be sweet. I can picture the horde of delighted and happy crowd of wedding guests from literally all over the galaxy coming to see this finally frickin' happen because of all of the various characters who have either looked at Kirk or Spock when they're together like, aw, when you two gonna kiss? Everyone's gonna want to be at this wedding now that it's finally happening.
I think the color scheme should be silver and blue, and they should have a 3-layer, 3-dimensional chess cake. It's a callback to the first time we ever saw Spock and Kirk together. They were playing 3D chess, of which Spock is supposed to be a master, but Kirk beats him with intuition. And I think that's the theme of the whole thing. It's like their two personalities fusing. So we've got like a lot of ceremony. We've got the Vulcan lyre playing. We've got lots of Vulcan culture. They definitely have those guys with like the beak-style leather masks from Amok Time.
Yeah.
Involved in this somehow.
Oh, the bridal party attendants.
They use the slingshot effect to go back and get T'Pau, the Vulcan dignitary,
Right.
to do their vows for them.
Basically the most badass Vulcan in the world. She can single-handedly tell the Federation, this is fine, and it interrupts peace conferences.
They bring her in on the litter and everything. So we've got the finest in art, we've got the finest in music, we've got the best technology, but then it's also like a rager. We've got Romulan ale from Kirk's Private Reserve. So
Yeah.
everybody gets hammered and more like chaotic as the wedding goes on.
And of course there are some Romulans because, you know, there's still some dignitary kind of like peace process going on. There's got to be some kind of chicanery during the wedding. I mean, it's an adventure wedding. It's these two.
Yeah, I mean, hobbits no food, but the Enterprise has access to food from everywhere around the galaxy. Like in Journey to Babel, we see all that cool, like multicolored food on the table. So everything from the classics, from like fine dining, all the way to like weird things that look like Legos, plates full of them. Everybody is going to have something for them.
There should be like a long, elaborate walk up to where the wedding takes place, where there's that crazy brazier with the sort of incense-looking stuff burning, like there would be on Vulcan. But then instead of needing to like whack gongs or fight, they just clasp hands during their entire ceremony.
And-
So cool.
Yes, and because this is the action couple, there's a problem. It's like a Marvel Comics wedding. They're almost ready to say their vows, but then at the last moment, Klingons attack. Of course, their tuxes get ripped to shreds, especially Kirk's, and they have to fight off the aliens at the end. They have to hand out phasers to all the guests. And so everybody by the end of it is drunk on Romulan ale, sweaty, exhausted. Finally, they say their vows, shirtless as God intended. It's a wedding that everyone
with
will
a few
remember.
less people in the bridal party than there were at the beginning, right?
Some of the bridesmaids and some of the men of honor were asked to dress in red, and they will find out to their horror why that was. But other than that, everybody's fine.
That or the Klingons are just there for the Rager and everything is just fine. But, clearly Uhura needs to be like their joint best woman because the maid of honor and the best man are both sort of in charge of making any additional ceremonies come together, and Uhura gets shit done.
That's something we definitely have to say. These guys have the best team. I mean, both of these couples are in love, right? So they are maybe not like super focused on logistics, but Kirk and Spock have the best team in the galaxy to get all this stuff together. Scotty is going to DJ for the dance later, right? He's going to be
as proud as a proud Scottish engineer could ever be. Oh, it's going to be awesome. And McCoy is going to be there like being their weepy in-laws for both of them. There's no way that Spock's parents can cry at his wedding. Maybe his mom will, but his dad really won't. So McCoy's just going to have to cry twice, and then he will. So, it's going to be awesome. I am picturing all of the beautiful flowers that are going to come from their various botanist friends. It's going to be beautiful. There will be a fight, and then it will be beautiful again, and then there will be cake and dancing.
The only image I got to my mind after that was Kirk and Spock on the dance floor, and Kirk's telling Scotty to turn up the volume, and he's like, I'm giving it all she's got, Captain. That is all. That is all. Team Sam and Frodo. Gandalf is not a conjurer of cheap tricks, but he can get them to play the reception if you wish.
Oh, man.
Oh, best joke you've ever made on this show. So, the theme of their wedding is, of course, the Fellowship of the Rings. Plural, rings.
Because they're in love.
They are in love. The wedding party on Sam's side is going to be made up of Rosie and his kids because they know. And
they definitely
they 100%
know.
approve. They're like, you guys are just making official what you've been doing for the last several decades. It's totally cool. Frodo's side, it's going to look like his side is kind of light. He's standing up there on his own while Sam's side is all full. But all of a sudden, pulling off multiple copies of the One Ring are the rest of the Fellowship of the Ring. Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas and Boromir's back from the dead. And
Faramir's in there.
Awkward.
Eowyn.
Eowyn's there. Yeah. Merry and Pippin are there. It's wonderful.
Bill the Pony's there.
Of course. Well, he's the ring bearer.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, he's got his little rings like braided into his forelock.
At the wedding, they have dwarven ale, they have elven pastries, they have Gondor horse burgers. There's they actually contract a bunch of caterers from Game of Thrones to come, so you have that food porn stuff that George R.R. Martin likes to write about so much.
And the regular porn.
And also regular non-food related porn. Vulcan weddings, they can tend to be a little boring. The Vulcans aren't really big dancers, so half the wedding party on the other side of the island is going to be just a lot of wallflowers and people holding quiet and polite conversation at the tables.
Jingle,
but,
jingle, jingle, jingle.
Hobbits have the best parties. There's going to be a bunch of drunk dwarves there.
Yeah.
We're going to have the funding of the Kingdom of Gondor and the elves, and also all the money that, came from Bilbo's dragon treasure. In the middle of the dance, we're going to lower down a palantir like a disco ball from the ceiling, and it's going to be amazing.
Everybody from all of Middle-earth is going to want to go to this because Sam and Frodo are super crazy famous, and everybody's like, those are the people who saved our lives. So everybody's going to want to go. Everybody's going to be excited and happy for them. It's going to be like the royal wedding. They're going to be selling commemorative plates with Sam and Frodo smooching on them. That's how this is going to go. I also want to say Galadriel. So obviously she crossed over the sea. She's going to come back. She wants to officiate. She's like, no, you're not getting married without me. So she's going to stand up there and shed a very majestic tear and look amazing. Their colors are going to be green and silver because they got kind of Lothlorien type stuff as well going on in terms of their color scheme. As far as the Hobbit Rager aspect of it, Gandalf's going to be there doing some firework stuff. There's going to be the kind of Hobbit equivalent of beer pong, which is just drinking a whole bunch of beer without the pong involved. There's going to be some elves jamming out because they're like, oh, I didn't know, but I just thought I'd bring a lyre, just in case. And so there's going to be a bunch of elven ballads going on. Tom Bombadil's going to show up in the middle of it and be like, all right, now I'm going to break it down. And that is when the beat drops. And then big song about Old Manuel and some other stuff. And everybody's like, oh man, Tom, you're the best. And then Frodo and Sam sneak off to go like make out in a corner. Oh, forgot to say the very most important thing. This is so important, guys. So Gimli and Legolas obviously attend the wedding, and then like mid ceremony, Legolas' hand's just gonna creep onto like Gimli's thigh and just sort of like hold his hand.
Bob,
and they're just
Bob,
gonna
you're
sort
going
of
too
look
deep.
at each other.
You gotta get out.
No, oh god, they love each other
It's gonna
so
swallow
much
you
too.
whole. You have to stop.
Oh,
There's bouquet
She found
tension.
a
It's
ship
okay.
inside this ship.
Shipception. Oh.
She's gonna be caught in limbo if you don't pull her out.
Okay. Yeah, somebody get. All right, thanks for the kick there.
All right, we did it.
We did do it.
Seriously, guys, this one might destroy me more than any other one we've done. I really need some time to think about this one.
Emotional.
So talk amongst yourselves.
Well, I hope you guys are proud of yourselves, because this was all your idea.
I'm just delighted. I love all of this, and it has been fun to think about all of this. So
It's been a delight.
I know that obviously MeganBob is a regular and compulsive shipper. Does that apply to either of you guys from Gameable?
regular maybe, but not very compulsive. I really got into Lord of the Rings after high school. I enjoyed the movies, but it was really in my second read of the books after my senior year in high school that I was like, oh, this is great. Kris can attest to a period of time where I was bringing home every book about Middle-earth, and I actually transcribed the songs of Middle-earth into a personal notebook at one point.
Oh my god!
I just got really into it. It's and it wasn't just about Frodo and Sam. It was about kind of just the big history of Middle-earth. I love the mythology. I love the whole thing about the coming of the Valar and the Ainur and the song. And I got really into Tolkien's other writing. So I definitely, when I get into something, get into something.
I feel like you were maybe the only other person I've ever met, I don't know, the last 5 years, who's super into Lord of the Rings.
So good. It's so good, guys.
It is so deeply and profoundly sad and elegiac and such an epic, and I fucking love it. I just want to shove it in my face and eat it.
It's so mournful but hopeful and big and beautiful. It's a wonderful body of work. But watching Star Trek, I've got to say, I've watched Star Trek sporadically because I've had lots of other people in my life who ship the bejeebies out of it, and that can be a little intimidating. But watching the original series, going back to it and watching the movies, I got into this. You two need to kiss. This was sort of my first real attentive watch of Star Trek, except for Deep Space Nine. I'd watched that thoroughly and loved it.
And this could have been Miles and Bashir. It's just they're not well known enough, but those two are right on this level too.
Yeah, no, these two couples are definitely the cornerstones of the shipping conversation.
It's true.
For me personally, I have to admit, I don't really ship Frodo and Sam because of that sadness and the whole war and its consequences aspect of Lord of the Rings. I feel like that's such a sweet, profound love between those two characters. I feel like if this all ends and then the two of them are getting down with Rosie and Bag End, it just seems wrong to the story. I love it when characters come to a tragic ending. I don't know why, but I just feel like the ending of Frodo is sad and heroic and tragic in the best sense. So I'm not so much into the these characters coming together in a sexual or romantic way after the events of the story.
On a side note, and not to, undercut your deep kind of philosophical read on the emotional underpinnings of Lord of the Rings, how did none of us make a Bag End pun this entire time?
I chose not to. I was going to fill my entire thing with nothing but Bag End and Hobbit hole jokes and did not.
Okay, well.
I thought, I love it too much, and I can't do it.
I have a similar story where at one point my intro contained a long list of synonyms for Hobbit cunnilingus, and I decided to just drop that.
Oh God, do you have it?
Look,
read it now. Read it now to me.
I don't have it with me, and if I do this outside the context of a public podcast, I think we're both going to feel strange about it. So, yeah, it may be lost to time.
Yeah, just Kris calls me to tell.
yeah, email's not good enough. Just give me your personal number.
Oh man, you missed an incredible revelation.
I caught a bit of it. I caught Bob demanding people's fanfic things like a mad Roman emperor.
Bring to me on a silver platter.
Keep it secret. Keep it safe.
This one is seriously killing me more than a lot of them, because it's one thing to talk about who'd win in a fight, who's better at killing stuff, in a way that's always sort of detached. But when it's about pairings and romances in fiction. That's one of the things that I think fans in general, and myself in particular, get the most attached to. So it's really shitty to tell somebody like, oh, your subtextual thing you're reading into that isn't real or isn't valid. This is one of the most like out there theoretical ones we've done. If the normal ones that we're doing are like some sort of well-established hard science, this is like a weird soft science, or maybe this is just like absurd high-level theoretical physics where like all of the evidence that we're dealing with is all like third hand and subtextual and all assumed, but none of it's actually there.
Welcome to season 3, man.
Yeah, we're going deep on this one. So what I boiled it down to was this. It's the sort of thing where in the text itself, there's a lot more evidence that Sam and Frodo actually do stuff, and there's a lot less evidence that Kirk and Spock actually do stuff. But on the other hand, Team Kirk and Spock brought up that there's a lot of forces that are sort of pushing Sam and Frodo together, and there's a lot of forces that are pushing Kirk and Spock apart in the fiction as well. And so those are also some strange, like, balancing factors. I'm so won over to both of these, and I want them both to be true very much, but I think I gotta go with, just because for strength of the arguments, for like, in terms of what you were able to do with the material, I think that Kirk and Spock were able to twist it much better into making their argument true than Sam and Frodo were, so... yeah.
Yay, we win, but we all won. I mean, let's be real. Both of these kisses will happen. This was just a race to kissing.
It's a race to the kiss-nish line.
Kiss-nish line. Aw.
Need some workshopping. Kris and Katrina, do you guys have any plugs you would like to do?
So we're from the Gameable Podcast, which is right now doing Saturday morning cartoons, but we do animation of all kinds. And if you would like to go check that podcast out, you can go to gameabledisneypodcast.tumblr.com, and you can find links to all of our episodes about Saturday morning cartoons and Disney and Pixar and everything. We are also Gameable Podcast on Twitter. And you may be interested to know that I also have another podcast that Katrina is not in any way responsible for its content, called MegaDumbCast, which is a daily podcast about the contents of Palladium role-playing games. It is MegaDumbCast on Podbean, on Twitter. It is MegaDumbCast everywhere. There's an Instagram, so just look up MegaDumbCast.
I am a huge fan of both shows. These people do amazing work. We're always happy to have you guys on.
Okay, so I have an idea.
Oh,
Hear me out.
It's a
Hear me
kit.
out. Next Patreon goal for Slash Fiction. We can get to like 275. Every host eats a nasty ass can of Heinz mac and cheese.
I would
Who
be
does that
sick
serve?
though.
The fans, because we're gonna videotape it.
Suffer.
They're our fans. Don't they like us?
Maybe you could do an episode where only the losing team has to eat the mac and cheese.
Oh god.
Oh, high
Suddenly the
stakes.
Stakes in these things.
The stakes get real.
It's gonna be a very cheesy episode.
Oh, cheesy. Oh god.
That might be one you want to have in the can for later.
Oh, there it is.
Do I have to go?
Oh,
no,
God,
I'm
sorry,
going
I'm
to the
sorry.
Undying Lands right now. Get at me, elf boat. I'm leaving.
Time for the ship thanks.
Oh, nice.
The following people on Twitter are all in a giant relationship.
Oh, wow.
So thank you to Krista CS, Emlyn625, Fake the Jake, The Gameable Podcast, shit! Florian, Crinch, Mike Booch, Bradford Boltman, Press Down to Orb, Cosplay Fiend, Eugenia Says, Hayden Whom Time Forgot, Vander Turner, and Andrew Young, who, by the way, extra shout out, wrote a really good, like, honest tweet about his expectation for collaboratory and how we, like, exceeded it, essentially. So it was really sweet. I appreciate a good, genuine, critical tweet.
It's been good to see the feedback on that. If anybody else has more thoughts about that, please share, because that one's very new and we're still trying to work it out. So yeah.
It was really good.
Also, if you have ideas for characters or settings or whatever, say it.
And thank you, Lucas Brown, for the super awesome photo manip you did of Godzilla throwing a shark. I really appreciate it. It made my day and possibly the rest of my life, because I am going to print it out.
On Tumblr, thank you to Sid Rabbit Blog, Jeep Rhyme, and Fatbus69.
Always there for us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you also to Brett Greer, the infamous immortal poker player who knows how to place his bets wisely. and who was featured on this particular episode of Smash Fiction due to his patronage of us over on our Patreon. And you too can be introduced into the wonderful world of God Poker by donating at $1 or more every month. And then you get other stuff too.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Smash Fiction. Next week, we have our second episode of Smash Metafiction, and after that, Blades of Glory versus Yuri on Ice.
Smash Fiction is produced by Miles Schneiderman and production assistant Sharon Schneiderman, with logo design by Claire Mulcairn.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod at Incompetech.com for our theme song, Hitman.
You can find us on Twitter at SmashFic Podcast and search for the Smash Fiction Podcast on Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice, and if you leave us a good review, we shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Smash Fiction is made possible thanks to our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast. Please consider donating as little as $1 each month. It helps us keep the show going. And we have great rewards and extra content for those who help us out.
If you have any suggestions, feedback, or other contributions, send them to us at smashfictionpodcast@gmail.com and help us continue the fight.
The only known substance in reality to be completely immune to entropy.
Does Heinz make mac and cheese?
In a can.
Oh man,
Yes.
as nature intended.
No. Oh, that's terrible. I did not know that existed. Oh,
And now
that
you will
is-
never unknow it.
I can never unknow. Gross. Oh my gosh, who cans cheese? Who?
I know. I feel like I have a disease now that I didn't have 5 seconds ago.
Who cans pasta? Who says let's can these
Chef
two
Boyardee,
things
I
together?
Well, I mean, yeah, I
Suppose.
was gonna say Chef Boyardee, but yeah,
Doesn't make it right.
All right. Yeah.
I accept it, but I don't approve of it.
What is this box? Why has it been in a cupboard? What is going on? I have so many
So-
questions.
Essentially.
No, the mystery's better.
Okay, all right.
You tell us what
Kit,
the void box
Kit has spoken.
Okay.
Right in with your theories about the void
It's
box.
ultimate. It's the kind of box you can buy what you can put a microphone in, so that way your sound is crisper and less full of other shit.
Oh, so it's like a pop filter.
Except for
More
it's
like a
just like
diorama
box
that
shape.
goes like behind the mic.
Oh, it's those little like it looks like an Elizabethan collar for a microphone deals.
Oh, this one's
mine's
actually a
mine's
box.
more of like it's like a little hum for your mic.
It's a little house.
That's adorable.
It's a mic. Yeah, it's a mic habitat. I put in a leaf so that way it would feel like it was home. I guess.
Now you just have to like tape in some like old bits of twine and little bits of cable. That way it has friends.
You could put in a photo of its family, like some other microphones.
Yeah, all these things. You know what? This is gonna be my weekend project, guys. Thank you.
All right.
The grandpa radio microphone.
We're just creating sitcoms like at such a crazy rate here. Like I can't handle it.
I know.